Most comedy wrestlers are funny because they look silly. Les Kellett was different. He was funny because he looked like he might fall over at any second, whilst quietly being one of the hardest men in British wrestling. That is what made him brilliant. That's what made him dangerous, and that is why Les Kellett might be Britain's hardest funny man. Hello everyone, I'm Josh Faulkner, the wrestling comedian. Make sure you like the video and drop me a follow. This is the story of Les Kellett. Les Kellett was born in Bradford in 1915 and became one of the most popular wrestlers of the world of sport era. On paper, he shouldn't have been a television star. He wasn't young, glamorous, or built like a superhero. Wrestling Heritage described him as an unlikely looking middle-aged Yorkshireman, but also one of the most charismatic and popular wrestlers amongst armchair fans. And that is the key to Les Kellett. He understood television, he understood timing, he understood that wrestling wasn't just about holds and counters, it was about making people react. Kellett's greatest trick was making the audience think he was finished. He would wobble around the ring, look confused, stumble into trouble, act punch drunk, and appear completely overwhelmed. Then, just as the opponent thought they had him, Les would suddenly snap back into life. That was the magic. 1 second he looked like someone's granddad had wandered into the ring by mistake. The next second he was tying someone in knots, smashing them with a back chop, or catching them in a hold. But the mistake would be thinking Les Kellett was just a comedy act. He absolutely wasn't. Behind the clowning was a genuinely tough wrestler. He was respected and feared by other professionals, and his reputation was that if he wanted to make life difficult for you in the ring, he absolutely could. That's why the comedy worked. It had danger underneath it. The audience laughed because he was funny, but the wrestlers knew he could wrestle. That is a very different thing. One of the best examples of Kellett's genius came when he worked with Brian Glover, who wrestled as Leon Aris. Glover would later become famous as an actor, but in the ring with Kellett, the two produced some of the funniest British wrestling ever broadcast. It was slapstick, timing, physical comedy, and proper wrestling all rolled into one. And that's something modern wrestling often gets wrong about comedy. It thinks comedy means not taking wrestling seriously. Les Kellett took wrestling seriously enough to be funny inside it. The holds mattered, the rules mattered, the opponent mattered. That's why the humour landed. Kellett became a regular on ITV's World of Sport during the 1960s and 70s when British wrestling was watched by millions. He even received recognition beyond wrestling, reportedly being nominated for ITV Sports Personality of the Year and meeting Prince Philip in the 1970s. Away from the ring, Kellett lived a very Yorkshire life. He ran a cafe called the Terminus in Thornton, West Yorkshire, with his wife Margaret, and also worked land behind the property. It's hard to imagine a modern wrestling star finishing a TV taping and then going home to look after livestock, but that was Les Kellett. He continued wrestling for decades before retiring in the 1980s, and he passed away in 2002 at the age of 86, but his influence is still there whenever wrestling fans talk about comedy wrestling done properly, because Les Kellett wasn't just funny, he was believable, he was tough, he was clever, and he understood something very few wrestlers ever master. If the audience are laughing, shouting, and completely invested in what you're doing, then you're doing your job. So, was Les Kellett Britain's funniest wrestler? Probably, but more importantly, he might have been Britain's hardest funny man. If you remember watching Les Kellett, or if you've gone back and watched his matches, let me know in the comments. And if you want more wrestling stories, opinions, and laughs, you know what to do, and remember, I'll see you on the next one.